On speed.
The character I play is Dave Spritz. He's a Chicago weatherman, and I point that out because a Chicago weatherman is a whole different animal than a Los Angeles weatherman. You know, a Los Angeles weatherman, he's got basically one season. The weather here is so intense, it can be 30 degrees one day and 80 degrees another day.
Our Spritz Nipper of the week with a high of just 24.
Although it's intense, it makes it interesting.
I'm Tom Skilling. I'm the chief meteorologist with WGN-TV in Chicago, and I was contacted by Paramount scouts early on. They were kind of casing our office to see what a real weather office looks like. And they came through and were asking what was on our monitors and what sorts of charts we look at each day and what sort of information we look at and kind of what our day is like.
After the story was done, we spent tech time with our big guy in Chicago, Tom Skilling, who is a meteorologist. He's exceptional. He's a scientist and a really good broadcaster of the weather.
Chicago weatherman is a very important weatherman because everyone in Chicago relies on him so much. And if he gets it wrong, it really can ruin their day.
Fortunately, I've never been hit with anything, but there is an association the audience draws with you and the weather, which is quite interesting. They'll ask you, did you bring this weather? Or are you responsible for this weather? And you have standard replies to that, you know, something like, well, gee, it's a gorgeous day, but we had a lot of help. Or it's a crummy day and not our fault. We don't control this any more than we do the nice days. But that's the sort of interaction you get with people. They see you as not just the messenger, weather messenger, but also as somebody who has some control over what's happening. Of course, we don't.
Why even forecast?
It's a technical art, not a science. People get that.
Let's narrow it down, Tim.
Dave, it's random. We do our best. A day can have that variance.
We really went to Tom for kind of our technical advisor. And, you know, our kind of big metaphor in the movie is that, you know, the emotional currents of one's life can't be predicted in the same way that the weather can't be predicted.
Background action and action.
Gore is terrific. I am so impressed with just how down to business he is. We worked closely over the weeks before the shooting began in preparing the graphics that are used on the chroma key screens. And they went over every single detail. I mean, it was amazing how careful they were about what we put together. And I always sensed it was being done with an eye toward what Nick Cage would feel comfortable with.
I think the hardest part about being a weatherman was just simply that I wasn't prepared. I came in on the day and they said you have an hour to rehearse and this is the clicker and you got to figure out what the geography is on the map and oh, and by the way, here's 2 paragraphs of dialogue. And I said, well, can't you put the dialogue on a teleprompter? I haven't had time to memorize. I said, no, we're going to have your image on the teleprompters.
Nick Cage has been just terrific. It's not easy coming into somebody else's environment and trying to reproduce what they do. It's pretty impressive the way he steps into that role, stands in front of this strange green screen with nothing on it and interacts with it like he's been doing it all of his life.
It's very hard to do all that, to do, you know, those gestures. And one of the things early on is, you know, when we first moved, he kind of is practicing those gestures, the clicker and the turn and all of that. That's part of his identity, and it's kind of like his Tai Chi, and you know, in the morning. I mean, he gets up, has his coffee, and he runs through his business.
You have to really practice it, and he's been very instrumental in kind of teaching Nick the rhythm of that, and teaching Nick the rhythm of delivering the weather, and looking at the teleprompter, and looking at the green screen, and having the monitor in your ear, and it's a lot of practice.
The hardest thing, I think, for an actor to do is exposition. You know, so you know, Nick could do 5 pages of dialogue if it's emotionally based, but it's very difficult to come in and do, you know, a page and a half of, you know, down in Waukegan we've got 32, and it's a hard thing to remember because it's just data. So those were difficult scenes to shoot.
But first, Dave Spritz has a check of our national weather. Dave? Well, thanks, Bryant. Well, it feels like spring if you're in the Northeast. Is it going to last? Let's take a look.
This has been a lifelong passion. The weather has always fascinated me. My parents could never quite figure out what they had done wrong. They would have preferred to have had a doctor or a lawyer. But I don't know, the weather affects everything we do so directly. It affects the way we feel, it affects our psychology, it affects the way the economy works. We find it even affects the way medicines work and all. So I think that's why there's this bond between the audience and the weather forecaster that's kind of unique among news team members, because you're dealing with a subject that has some impact on everybody at some level.
And that's who I am. The Weatherman.